Initials on contracts. Are they required or are they not required? Hi, everybody. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors and the director of the Real Estate Academy of America, here with a contract tip that I hope helps you out. So, the question is, are initials on exhibits required to have an actual enforceable binding contract or not? And how this came about is there was a contract with a buyer and a seller, obviously, and uh they were binding, or they thought they were binding, and then the seller got another offer. So the seller was trying to get out of offer number one to go with, or contract number one, to be able to accept offer number two. And the seller, it bound the contract. Let's see, the buyer made an offer, seller made a counter offer on the counter offer form. Buyer accepted the seller's counter and sent notice of acceptance back to the seller. We know by the contract definition that makes it a binding contract. Again, seller said, they got a better offer and they wanted to go with that offer and did not want the contract that they had binding. So the question was, is their contract binding or not? And the reason this came up from the seller is that signatures, fully executed signatures, were on the counter offer, and seller never initialed any of the exhibits. So begs the question, do they have an enforceable contract? Do they have a voidable contract? Do they have an actual binding contract? Was the seller in that situation free to accept another contract, go binding on another contract? As I always teach in my classes, and y'all that take my classes and have watched these videos know what I'm going to say. What am I going to say? Tell me, comment below. Yes, you got it. Let's look at the contract as the instructions and let's see what the contract says. So this is the I'm going by the Georgia Association of Realtors contract 2024, but this is actually has been in all of them for several years. And I am going to share my screen and we are going to briefly walk through this. So let's look first at the purchase and sale agreement and let's see what it says. We are in the Georgia Association of Realtors Form F-201 Purchase and Sale Agreement, and we are on page 9 of 10, the paragraph C9, where it talks about exhibits and addenda. And it states all exhibits and or addenda attached hereto, listed below, or referenced herein are made part of this agreement. And then there's a place where GAR has pre-printed some, and there's a place for other where it has the name of the exhibit and a blank to put a letter A, B, C, D. And again, you must check the box for that exhibit. So that's where it talks about the exhibits that are made part of the purchase and sale agreement. Now let's look at the counter offer form. This is Georgia Association of Realtors Form F-249, counter offer to or modification of the unaccepted original offer. There's a lot to go over in this form, but for today's video, I just specifically want to talk about initials. So let's look, what does the counteroffer say about initials? And here's what it says. Couple of things. Paragraph C. Effect of accepting this counteroffer. When this counteroffer is signed by buyer and seller and a copy of the same is delivered to both parties, the original offer, as modified by this counteroffer, constitutes a legally binding agreement. Now, here's the part about initials. Since the original offer, including all exhibits thereto, is incorporated by reference into this counteroffer, only the counteroffer needs to be signed to create a legally binding agreement between the parties. In other words, if the buyer makes an offer, seller is making a counteroffer on this counteroffer form. Even if the seller does not go back and initial any of the exhibits, you still have a legally binding, enforceable contract between the parties. What about initials? Here's the issue. The issue is a lot of lenders, especially if there was a financing contingency exhibit attached, a lender will require both buyer and seller initials on especially the financing contingency exhibit. What do I suggest you do? As an instructor and as the broker, what I teach our agents in our brokerage, somebody else could be holding your license, which is fine. But what I suggest as an instructor is let's look at the next paragraph. Paragraph D, clean copy of agreement. At any time prior to closing, either party, if so requested by the other, shall sign a conformed copy. Conformed is just a fancy word for clean copy that we use in the real estate jargon of the agreement, combining the terms of the original offer with the controlling and supplemental provisions of this counteroffer into one document, including initialing or signing, as the case may be, all exhibits. Now I'll get to the next part in a second. So if a lender is saying we need exhibits, we need initials on the exhibits, what I suggest you do is request a conformed or clean copy where it just combines all the terms of the original offer and those terms that were changed via the counteroffer into one purchase and sale agreement with all exhibits attached and initialed and or signed. Then GAR says include special stipulation 622 conformed copy of agreement in the conformed or clean copy. So I've taken the liberty of writing that out for you so you'll know what that special stipulation is. And what it says is buyer and seller. So you're going to do a clean copy. You're going to pull out a blank purchase and sale agreement, blank exhibits. You're going to write it all up in a way that reflects what the terms are between the buyer and the seller, the binding contract. Then you're going to add a special stipulation on your clean copy that says buyer and seller acknowledge that the above agreement is a conformed copy of an agreement between the parties dated, fill in the date from the original. In the event of any conflict between this conformed agreement and the original thereof, all parties agree that the original agreement shall control. So again, if you have a lender that requires initials, don't have your sellers go back and initial the exhibits from the original offer because those terms may have changed via the counteroffer. Just request a clean copy or a conformed copy. You'll get initials on all those exhibits and just include this special stipulation. Now, another issue that comes up. What happens if there is let's say a buyer sends an offer, and in that exhibit page on the purchase and sale agreement, they reference there is a loan contingency exhibit or a sale release contingency exhibit or some exhibit. But when the offer actually comes across to the seller, that exhibit is not, the paperwork of that exhibit is not actually attached as part of the package for the seller to sign. Seller signs it, can demonstrate they've never received a copy of the exhibit, but it was actually referenced in the exhibit list in the purchase and sale. What about that? Do you have a binding contract? And is that exhibit part of the contract? Again, I read it, but let me point it out this time. The answer is yes. Let me show you why I say that and where the instructions say that. Again, whenever you take a class or watch a video, don't take somebody's word for it just for the word. Look for the evidence of why that person, why that instructor, why that broker, why that teacher is saying what they're saying, whether it be in the contract itself that the parties sign or Georgia law, or license law, Georgia license law. So let's look, let me share my screen again, and let me go over that a little bit more in depth with you guys actually looking at it. So again, this is the Georgia Association of Realtors Purchase and Sale Agreement Form F-201. And you've read it. This is one of those things that you've read, but didn't pay attention to or didn't click. Now that you've seen it, you'll never unsee it. So again, paragraph C9, exhibits and addenda. All exhibits and or addenda attached hereto. So even if it's not referenced, but it's attached, it's part of the binding contract, and the terms of that exhibit are binding upon the parties if they go binding with that exhibit. Listed below, if there is an exhibit or an addenda that is listed here or spelled out here with the checkbox, that is again incorporated into the offer and or binding contract if the parties go binding with that exhibit, or referenced herein. In other words, let's say it's not checked here, and let's say it's not attached, but there is, let's say the parties write, the buyer writes, or it could be a seller on a counteroffer form too, a special stipulation that references an exhibit. So it says all parties agree, I don't know, that the FHA loan contingency exhibit, the time for whatever it is. If an exhibit or an addendum is referenced in the contract somewhere, typically under the special stipulation, even if it's not checked here, and even if it is not attached, all of those three instances, the exhibit and or an addendum or multiple addendum, which would be addenda, are made part of this agreement. So even if it's not there, it's part of the agreement. So agent point of practice. If you get an offer, if you're a listing agent and you get an offer from a buyer and it references an exhibit, but the exhibit is not attached, before your seller accepts that contract, it would be in the seller's best interest to actually lay eyes on and read the entire exhibit so the seller knows and understands what it is that they are agreeing to. But even if that gets missed, the seller has agreed to it. And again, it could be in a counteroffer too. The seller has agreed to it by the fact that it is referenced in the purchase and sale agreement. My beginning question, did the seller have the contractual ability to accept offer number 2? Did they in fact have a binding agreement? And the answer is yes. The seller had a binding agreement with buyer number 1. The only way they could have negotiated and accepted offer from buyer number 2 would have been to have negotiated it and signed it as a binding backup contract utilizing the backup contingency exhibit. Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences on exhibits and initials, and especially our lenders, and do they require them or not? Thank you all so much for watching. Please like this video if you found it useful, share it with others, and subscribe so you don't miss any contract tips. I am Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors and the director of the Real Estate Academy, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education. Bye. If you like that video, check out the one here. If you like the content on this entire channel, please click here to subscribe. I try to take even the most complicated of real estate situations and make them crystal clear. See what I did there? Real estate made crystal clear. Thank you guys so much for watching.